previous narrations I have spoken about the Philippines and how it was once perhaps the most powerful and diverse of Southeast Asia before the Spanish destruction. When the Spaniards came in 1521, this marks the end of everything. I have had many comments and requests to once again speak of the history of this country before the Spanish destruction. I have actually did history about it before, but I will now do the most detailed historical account I can possibly do to the demands of the viewers, listeners, and subscribers. The Lost Kingdoms range from a native Luzon kingdom to another kingdom founded by a minor prince from an Indian empire, to a confederacy founded by exiles from an ancient Indonesian state, and an Islamic sultanate that was able to completely evade Spanish colonization. And last but not least, one ancient kingdom that existed before the Spanish destruction and still exists to this day. But you would never think of all that when you look at a modern map of the Philippines. It is completely unheard of. When you see maps or timelines of Northeast or Southeast Asia, many have asked, why is the Philippines never included on the map, while neighboring regions like Malaysia and Indonesia are? This is where the truth lies, or does not. When Malaysia and Indonesia became European colonies, most of their pre-European heritage and history remained during the occupation. With the Philippines, it did not. As was Spanish and Portuguese custom when they were building their empires, the native culture and identity of the conquered nation and people was destroyed. The Spanish and Portuguese crowns thought that by demoralizing the people they conquered, they would be easier to control. And they were right, for a time at least. Another factor was that when the British and Dutch controlled Annam, Malaya, and Srivijaya, now called Malaysia, Burma, and Indonesia, they actually just controlled the population. Most of the culture remained, but basic customs had to be forced upon the people, such as dress, presentation, and language. The same thing occurred when the French occupied Annam and Tonkin, now called Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. However, when the Europeans took possession of these regions, they were not unified in the way we imagine today. In all cases, they were smaller settlements that became larger as the native dynasty or kingdom became weaker, such as the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, or the tributary nation became weaker. Hence, China's vassal states of Burma, Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Spain controlled the Philippines from 1521 to 1898. That's 377 years. The British controlled Burma from 1824 to 1948. 124 years. The French controlled Indochina from 1887 to 1954. 67 years. The British controlled Malaysia from 1826 through 1946. 120 years. The Portuguese controlled Macau from 1557 to 1999, 442 years. The British controlled Hong Kong from 1842 to 1947, that's 155 years. If we use these years as a basis, then the Philippines was the second oldest European transformed region in Northeast or Southeast Asia. Macau was not a colony in the traditional sense, it was mostly a port. Not even used that much until the mid to late 1800s. The Philippine Islands were used more commercially by the Spanish on their routes to Mexico. In many respects, Luzon was under foreign control longer than any other power. With this in mind, it's easy to understand why the Philippines has lost its Asian heritage. When we look at a map, the Philippines is south of China and the west of Vietnam. It should have had more contact than Malaysia and Indonesia. Perhaps it did, but we will never know. Here's something we do know. The Philippines is the only Roman Catholic nation in Asia, anywhere in Asia. And Asia is a very large region of the world. Isn't it odd? It's a legacy of the Spanish who forcefully converted most of the population to Christianity during their control of the region. What existed in the region before the Spanish Christianity crusade? Once again, only few records remain. It's time for the truth to be known. From here on, in the narration, these islands will not be called by its Western name. We will once again call these regions by their ancient and true titles. Possibly the oldest of the ancient realms was Tondo, also called Luzon or Luzon. This kingdom has no establishment date. There is no records that give proof to when it was formed. Only Spanish records show that it was conquered in 1589. The oldest document in the Philippines dates to the year of 900. The document itself, the Laguna Copperplate inscription, was discovered in 1989 and caused a sensation. It was estimated that record keeping began after the Spanish destruction in 1589, but this predates that by centuries, meaning that Tondo was in existence for possibly centuries before the Spanish arrived on those shores. In the ancient days, there was the Lakan, which was the equivalent of king. Tondo had a series of kings as they were called the Lakandula, while the nobles called Datu were the nobility of the region, not just of Luzon but of other regions as well. Indian in origin, the term Datu was changed to Don during the Spanish destruction. Although the Constitution currently prohibits granting new titles of Datu, descendants of Datu may keep the title. The next reference to Tondo is in Ming Dynasty records. There is an account of trade with Tondo in the Ming court referring to the people as kings, not as chieftains or savages. It reflects a wider scope of ancient Chinese contact with the islands. It also gives proof to ancient accounts of Chinese settling in the islands and marrying local women, thus a reason why so many people in the north look Chinese. Because they are. Ancient Chinese had control with local Datu and even arguably influenced the islands with Ming support. The Spanish first came to Manila Bay in 1570. The Spanish, after hearing word of a wealthy and powerful Muslim settlement on Luzon, sent a conquistador to take the region. The ruler of the Kingdom of Manila at the time, Raja Suleiman II, refused to submit to Spanish rule. Defeated by the Spanish invaders, Manila would be then claimed by the Spanish. Refusing to accept the loss of their homeland to the invaders, the natives burned Manila to the ground rather than see Manila in all its glory in Spanish control. The Kingdom of Manila. Modern-day Manila is named in part for this ancient kingdom, having been established by the 5th Sultan of the Kingdom of Brunei. The establishment is sometime in the early 1500s, as Manila will be conquered by the Spanish in 1571. Kingdom of Butuan, not to be confused with the other kingdom of Bhutan, this was an ancient Indianized kingdom centered on the present Mindanao island city of Butuan. It was known for its mining of gold, its gold products, and extensive trade network across the Nusantara area. The kingdom had trading relationships with the ancient civilizations of Japan, China, India, Indonesia, Persia, Cambodia, and areas now comprised in Thailand. The time of establishment is unknown. Rulers of Butuan had relations with these ancient Southeast Asian kingdoms of Champa, now within present-day Vietnam. Song dynasty records show that Butuan had foreign relations as early as the year 1000. This deep respect and fear of China from Butuan sparked favoritism in the Chinese court, and dynasties after Song kept in contact with Butuan. A high point was the Yuan dynasty. Chinese records about the Rajanate stopped after the reign of Raja Siagu, the last independent Raja of Butuan. He was formally subjugated into the Spanish Empire after he made a blood compact with Ferdinand Magellan in 1521. The Rajanate of Cebu. The Rajanate of Cebu was a classical Philippine state which used to exist on the island of Cebu prior to the arrival of the Spanish. It was founded by Sri Lume, or Raja Muda Lumaya, a minor prince of the Indian Chola dynasty which occupied Sumatra. He was sent by the Maharaja to establish a base for expeditionary forces, but he rebelled and established his own independent Rajanate. Founded in the year 1450, it would be dissolved by a Spanish treaty in 1565. The Confederation of Ma Diaz, which was established during the 1200s and was conquered in 1569. During the 11th century, several exiled Datus of the collapsing empire of Srivijaya, led by Datu Pui, led a mass migration to the central islands of the Philippines, fleeing from Raja Makatuano of the island of Borneo. Upon reaching the island of Panay and purchasing the island from the Negrito chief Marikudo, they established a confederation and named it the Confederation of Ma Diaz, centered in Aklan, and they settled the surrounding islands of the Visayas. This confederation reached its peak under Datu Pado Jiong During his reign, the Confederation's hegemony extended over most of the islands of Visayas. This kingdom was strong enough to make naval attacks against Chinese imperial ships. A particularly powerful kingdom, it was feared by both Tondo and Manila. The country of Mayi was another state that existed before the Spanish destruction. Centered on the island of Mindoro, records of it exist in Brunei and Song Dynasty China. The years of establishment and conquest by Spain are not exactly clear. The Sultanate of Maguindanao, an Islamic state that existed just before the Spanish destruction in 1500 and was dissolved in 1898. The historical realm was the entire peninsula of Zamboanga, although at its height it controlled much of Mindanao. During the Spanish destruction, the Sultanate was able to fend off Spanish invasion and was never colonized by Spain. The Sultanate of Sulu, the only kingdom which was established before the Spanish destruction to still exist, albeit in a weaker form. In 1380, Karim ul Maktoum and Sharif ul Hashim Syed Abu Bakr, an Arab trader born in Johor, arrived in Sulu from Malacca and established the Sultanate of Sulu. Sharif ul Hashim was a direct descendant of the Islamic prophet Muhammad. This sultanate eventually gained great wealth. Currently, the issue of those who would be the legitimate Sultanate of Sulu is disputed by several branches of royal families. Perhaps the strongest of all the kingdoms, Sulu fought against all invaders: Spanish, British, American, and even Philippine forces. The territory of Sulu came to be the largest of all the kingdoms and a source of much pride for the modern nation of the Philippines. The Sulu's territory was very distant. The Spanish never had full dominion over the Sulu as they were too dangerous and too distant to oversee. The range of Sulu covers much of the present-day Philippines and even Malaysia. The Sulu survived the Spanish destruction but was gravely weakened by the American takeover. Even the Americans were not able to fully subvert the Sulu. When the Philippine nation was created, the problem was handed over to them. As of now, the Sulu region is autonomous, not fully under Philippine control, and even to this day, few venture into its territory.